Good morning, sir. Good morning,
sir. Very good morning. We shall start.
Sir,
As per schedule.
thank you, sir. We can start, sir. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Officiating Committee Member of Syndicate. Sir, I am audible, sir?
sir. Audible, sir. Audible, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Please.
Member of Syndicate and our beloved Head of the Department of Commerce, Professor Gurumurthy, sir. Most respected, our inspiring faculty, today's resource person, Dr. Monica Vasam, sir. Sir has occupied various capacity in our university. He has served as a former registrar of our university. He has served as a controller of examination, dean faculty of management, and head of the department of corporate secretaryship. Now he is serving as a principal of Kovilur Aundavar College. Sir is a very eminent personality. He is a very legendary professor. He is a very inspiring professor to me and all the people of our university. Most respected faculty friends, my dear participant, very warm welcome one and all to this 14 days FDP program which is organized by our Department of Commerce. On behalf of the Department of Commerce and my own behalf, welcome you all one and all to this gathering. Thank you.
Now may I request and invite our Honorable Member of the Officiating Committee, Dr. Gurumurthy, sir, to say a few words about it. Thank you, sir. Now may I request our Honorable Chief Guest for special address, Professor Dr. Monica Vasam, to say start the program, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Good morning to all of you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome.
I'm extremely happy to be amidst all of you for this FDP on data analysis and the methods of research. Is it clear to all?
Audible, sir.
It's very clear, sir.
Okay. So let me compliment the Department of Commerce for organizing a program of this kind for the benefit of the research scholars. And I thank the department for inviting me to share some of my thoughts on the...
Sir, echo ಆಗುದು sir.
Is it? Again it happens? No, I have been...
Yes, sir. Now it's okay, sir.
Okay. I have been asked by the organizers to address on the topic identification of the research problem. And I have divided my session this way. The first session 10 to 11:30, there will be conceptual ideas, the theoretical part. And in the second portion, I plan to involve everyone with regard to the selection of the topics or identification of the problem for research, which will really be beneficial to the beginners as well as experienced researchers. Now, first of all, for undertaking research, we the human beings have two things basic in common. Every human being is curious, and every human being has inquisitiveness. The curiosity and the inquisitiveness, which are the distinctive features of a human being, they are the basis for research. We come across a number of questions in our life, in our day-to-day life. For example, take this present pandemic. Why this corona pandemic has affected so much of people? Where did it really start? And is it the fact that aged people are easily susceptible? We have a number of questions. Similarly, we come across many questions in our day-to-day life. Vaccination is done. Whether this vaccination is really effective? If it is effective, why the people who are vaccinated are again affected by the infection? And what is the percentage of the people who are vaccinated and affected? Percentage of the people not vaccinated and affected? So, we have a number of questions every day. And we try to seek answers to all these questions. Similarly, in our day-to-day life also, we encounter a number of problems. Questions which arise in the day-to-day routine life, and problems which we encounter in our life. For questions, we try to seek answers. For problems, we seek to find a solution. Seeking answers to the questions, finding solutions to the problems, they have been the basis of human progress. If you don't find answers to the questions which you have, if you don't attempt to find a solution to the problems which you encounter, then there is no progress in the human life. And when you make a systematic search for finding answers to the questions, for finding solutions to the problems, this is called research. Therefore, everybody is engaged in some form of finding answers to the questions and solutions to the problems. What makes the difference between the ordinary finding of answers, finding of solutions to the problem, and research? In research, we make a systematic effort. And this systematic effort implies research. Clifford and Woody, the author, has defined the research as defining and redefining the problem. He says, first define the problem. That is what he says, first one. Define the problem and redefine the problem. Then second, you formulate the hypothesis. Third, you collect, analyze, and evaluate the data. Fourth, you make deductions. you make a research conclusion, and finally, you test the conclusion. This is what Clifford Woody says. So from this, we understand that the first and foremost step in research is defining and redefining the problem. Defining the problem, okay. What is redefining the problem? We select the problem. We are going to focus only on selection of the problem today, selection of the topic, or identification of the problem, formulation of the problem. What is redefining? Suppose you have not made sufficient efforts to find the feasibility of the study, to find the possibility of the study in the middle of your research, then you have to redefine the problem. Sometimes you come across people going for change of topic, modification of the topic in the middle of the research or after some time, after commencement of the research. But always we have to bear in mind the points for selecting the problem. Certain points are there. But before that, I am reminded of the poem written by Robert Frost in his renowned poem, The Road Not Taken. There are 2 lines only, 3 lines only I take from his poem and say, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the road less traveled by. This is very much useful for identification of the problem. This poem is in consonance with the statement that we should not choose the topics for our research which are already explored. We must always choose unexplored areas. I took the road less traveled by. I have not traveled on the road which others also travel. I take the road which is not traveled by, which is less traveled by. But I will suggest here a modification in Robert Frost's second sentence. I took the road less traveled by. It must read like this. I took the road not at all traveled by others. So choose the topic from totally unexplored area if you are really confident, and that has made all the difference, he says. It has made all the difference. And for research, before going to the topic, there are beginners, there are experienced researchers in this forum. First one is we need rational thinking, a logical thinking. This rational thinking or logical thinking is a must for every researcher. I will give a simple example, and I would like all the participants to listen to this example and give me your answers. Let it be interactive. This is the example. 2 people, 2 employees come out of a chimney, a charcoal chimney, after finishing their work. And when they come out, one person's face has black shades because they worked in a chimney, charcoal chimney. Whereas the other man's face is neat and clean. This is the example. Now, the Guru asked the Shishya, taking this example, the Guru asked the Shishya, disciple, tell me, who will wash the face first? This is the first question which the Guru asked the Shishya. I repeat, two employees come out of a chimney after working for hours together inside it, and when they come out of the chimney, one person's face is having the black shades, whereas the other person's face is neat and clean. Both of them come out of the chimney. Now the Guru asked the Shishya, who will wash the face first? Can you join? Can you interact with me? Of the two people, who will wash the face first? Whether the person who has black shades on his face or the other one whose face is neat and clean. You can interact with me.
The person who have a black shade on the face, sir.
Yes. So the Shishya replied like this only. Guru, it is very obvious that the person who has a dirty face, black shades on his face, will only wash his face first. This is what he said. But Guru said, no.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yes.
The first person he washed the face while looking into the deep waters, he can see his image. That's why he thawed cleanly his face. Second person, while he is cleaning, the whole water is turmoil. That's why he cannot see, visualize his face inside the water.
Now, of the two, who will wash the face, or will no one wash the face? Now, the answer came first that the person who has black shades on the face will wash his face first. Now, the second one is, second instance is the person who has the dirty face will look at the other person who has a neat face, clean face. So what he will think? Because he has not seen any mirror and they have not communicated to each other. On looking at the other person whose face is neat and clean, he will think that his face is also neat and clean. And therefore, the person who has black shades on his face will not wash his face. This is the answer given by the Guru to the Shishya. Second alternative. Now, the Shishya said, yes, you are right, Guru. But again, Guru said, no, this is also not correct. Sudhamadi, please stop your presenting mode. You are in the presentation mode. Sudhamadi, please stop the presentation mode. Now, the third alternative is the person who has dirty face will look at the other person and therefore he will not wash his face. This is the second alternative. Now, the third alternative is the neatly clean face fellow will look at the other person who has a dirty face. So he will think that our face is also dirty, therefore he will wash his face. On looking at the other person, the person whose face is having the black shades, he will also wash his face. Now, third alternative is both the fellows will wash their faces. Now, the Guru says, Shishya, sorry, I have not forgotten this aspect. So, first alternative, the person who has his black shades on the face alone will wash. Second answer is the person who has a neat face is seen by the person who has the black shades on the face, and therefore nobody will wash the face. Third one, both will wash the face. Now, fourth alternative is, there is one more alternative. In the first one, both will wash the face. In the fourth alternative, both will not wash the face because one looks at the other. Dirty face fellow looks at the clean face fellow. Clean face fellow face is clean, and therefore both of them will not wash their face. This is the fourth alternative. Now, for one instance, there are four alternatives. Now, the Guru finally asked the Shishya, are these four alternatives, or is there any other more alternative? The Shishya says, no other alternative, Guru. That's all. Guru says, still you have to use your logical thinking. Why you have failed to think that both the people work in the charcoal chimney, both of them come out of the chimney after finishing their work, and when I said the first one has a black shade on his face, the other fellow has a clean face, don't you think that how it could happen? Both of them come out of the same chimney, and therefore both their faces should be black. This is the reality. Therefore, the truth has many faces. This is called logical thinking. And for research, this logical thinking or rational thinking is needed. And second one is, we need exhaustive treatment of the data that we collect. Expert treatment. In Tamil, we used to say, Nunipul Meidal, which means no depth of knowledge. We used to tell, breadth and the depth of the knowledge is required for undertaking research. Then only we can have exhaustive treatment or expert treatment of the data that we collect. And what is our object here? When you collect the data, our object is, as already at the outset I said, to find answers to the questions or to find solutions to the problems. We search for solutions. And in research, we always aim at precision, exactness. Of course, the degree may vary between social sciences and physical sciences. In physical sciences and life sciences, exactness may be 100%. Precision may be 100%. Whereas in our social sciences, we may not achieve 100% precision or accuracy because we deal with the human behavior. And we must analyze adequate data. You could have seen at the time of elections, the pre-poll survey is conducted by many agencies and they give the results. Sometimes the results may tally with the actual election results, or many a times the pre-poll survey results do not tally with the election results. Why? It is because the data were not adequate. They were not representative. So we must analyze adequate data. And when we collect the facts, we must find out the relationship of the facts. Cause and effect relationship will be there. mutually exclusive relationship will be there. The data may be dependent on each other or independent of each other. So what is the relationship of the fact? That you must find out. And every fact that you collect, you must carefully observe and consider. Careful observation of the data is very much essential. That is why at the time of a field survey, when we go for primary data collection, we should not take it very lightly. We must take it very seriously. We must collect the data with all earnestness. We must observe their behavior and we must record them. And finally, in research, what is needed is honesty and hard work. I am reminded of the statement made by a very senior expert and professor in Virudhunagar. He said, later he went to Mangalore University as professor, and he said in the class, research does not require much intelligence or brilliance. It requires a donkey's hard work, he used to say. Hard work is necessary. Of course, brilliance is needed, but brilliance is not a must. Those who are hardworking in nature will achieve good results in research. So, honesty and hard work. These are the canons of a good research. And John W. Best, those who are doing research in education will know well that John W. Best is the authority in research in education. He says, the secret of our cultural development has been only research. Why? How our cultural development has been due to the research? Because research only has pushed back the areas of ignorance. The areas of ignorance. 1 minute, please. There are two phases here. Let me talk, but let me mute my video because it shows two faces rather. So, John W. Best says that the secret of our cultural development has been research because the research only pushes back the areas of ignorance. Our areas of ignorance are totally relegated to the background, pushed back, and new truths are discovered. What happens when new truth is discovered and areas of ignorance are totally pushed back? Better ways of doing the things and better products are found out. So, as Best has put it, our cultural development has been due to research. And we must be very careful while undertaking this research because it is only the selection of the proper problem for research helps us to undertake research. Now, let me just to show you the PPT also. Is it visible to all, the PPT? Vinayamurthy, can you see the PPT?
No, sir. Not visible, sir.
Okay.
Or not yet. If you send it, we will share, sir. No problem. Yes, coming, sir. Coming, sir. Yes.
Can
Sir,
you see?
voice is not audible, sir.
Is it? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Sir, coming, sir. Now coming.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Voice is not audible, sir.
But some people say that it is audible.
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Okay.
Audible, sir. Audible.
Right. Sorry for the technical interruptions here.
Sir.
It's not audible, sir.
Please check, ma'am, whether it is audible or not.
It's audible, sir.
Okay. Then for in her case only it is not audible. So kindly check your device.
Yes, sir.
Now let us start with the research problem. Research problem actually implies a difficulty which the person experiences in the context of theoretical or practical situation. Now here, I'm not going to simply read out what is there. As Whitney has beautifully put it, selection of the research problem means to put a fence around it. We put a fence.
It's not audible, sir.
Vinayakamurthy, is it audible or not?
Audible, sir.
Sir, it is audible, sir. It is audible, sir.
Sir, it's audible.
Sir, you are audible and your PPT is not visible.
Tell me whether PPT is visible or not. Others, Vinayakamurthy?
No, sir, it's not visible, sir.
Oh,
Just
sorry.
pin the CARS PPT.
It's visible and audible, sir.
Pardon?
Stop sharing, then start, sir.
It's visible, sir.
Visible.
It's also audible. Yeah.
Because I cannot proceed unless the PPT is visible and my voice is audible.
Sir, your voice is audible and the PPT also visible, sir.
Okay, ma. Thank you. So, now while selecting the topic, what is very important is the level at which the research is done. What is the level? Because the problem selection depends upon the level at which the research is done, whether undergraduate students or master degree students.
So your PPT is not visible.
Pardon?
Sir, PPT is not visible.
PPT is not visible, sir.
My goodness, why it is so?
Sir, I think you minimize that PPT. Don't minimize that PPT while sharing with Google Meet.
Because without minimizing the PPT, I cannot go for the sharing mode, you know.
Sir, you can have one more device, sir.
Yes. I have prepared the PPT, but I will check.
Sir, if possible, please send it, sir. We will share it, sir.
Which one?
PPT.
Yeah. Okay, then I will send it also.
Send it by mail, sir. We will share it.
Okay. மறுபடியும் விசிபிளா இல்ல.
Sir, you just send the PPT, sir.
Yes,
They'll
yes, I am
flash.
sending the PPT, ma. I am
Okay,
sending the PPT. Please wait. Identification of problems. Please check whether you have received the mail.
Mail on.
Sir,
just a minute, sir.
okay, now let me continue until it is.
Sir, now it's complete, please, sir.
Okay.
Sir, no, PPT is okay.
Okay.
Visible.
Now, please go to the second one. First one. So this we have seen the research problem, and I told you that the selection of the research problem depends upon the level of the researcher. If the researcher is an undergraduate student, yes. Is it audible?
Audible, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
Okay. So the level of the researcher must be looked into. If the researcher is an undergraduate student or a postgraduate student, the emphasis will be upon the learning process of the beginner. Suppose the problem is to be selected by an MPhil or PhD degree holder, then it should be a major problem which may require a comprehensive treatment. Now, in this case, the emphasis is not on learning process, it is on skill development and contribution to the knowledge. So I have just given you the learning levels. Undergraduate or postgraduate student, then learning process of the beginner. That is the emphasis. Second one, research degree, MPhil or PhD, the emphasis is upon the skill development and the contribution to the knowledge. Suppose you are already a teacher, you are already an experienced researcher. Now you choose a problem for your project work. Then the problem should be a complex problem, and it should make a significant contribution to the development of knowledge or refinement of the theory. So these are the three levels which are to be looked into at the time of selection of the topic. And what should be the mode of selection? Go to the next slide. Next slide. See, importance of the formulation. Everybody will say problem well defined is half solved. And here, what should be the mode of selection in research? Sometimes a doubt may arise whether the topic of research or the problem for research should be chosen by the researcher candidate himself or should be suggested by the guide. A beginner in research may prefer the first choice. That is, he may rely on the guide to suggest him some suitable topic. But if the guide suggests a topic, it is more or less an imposition. It is an attempt to get the work done rather than training the student to do the research on his own. The spontaneity of the scholar will be affected if the guide suggests the topic. So what I suggest is, it is better to choose the problem oneself, and he can seek the guidance from the supervisor or the guide. What is the duty of the guide here? He must dig out the area of interest of the researcher, the scholar, and show him the way. The actual selection should be done by the candidate only. Okay. If it is a beginner, he may depend on the research guide. If he is already having some experience in having completed some research, then he himself can choose the topic. This is mode of selection. But what is needed is a critical, as I said earlier, a curious mind, an imaginative mind. Three things are needed: critical mind, curious mind, and imaginative mind. And the researcher must be sensitive to the problem. If an actual problem takes place in the current situation, in the current environment, then the researcher must be sensitive to the problem, and it will be easy for him to identify the problem. Therefore, curiosity, inquisitiveness, critical and imaginative mind is necessary. And the primary task of research is, as I said earlier in the beginning, collection of data and analysis of data. Now, this is all to be dealt with in future sessions. But why I am mentioning is, the proper performance of collection of data and analysis of data depends on identification of the exact data. When can you go for a collection of data? Only when you identify the data, where the data will be forthcoming, and the information which are available in the records. For all these purposes, formulation of the right problem serves. So you just do the reverse engineering. Formulation of the right problem will help in identification of the exact data and information. Identification of the exact data and information will help in collection of relevant data and analysis of data, and the problem is well taken up for solution. So go in the reverse process. Therefore, if you want the problem to be solved, then you must choose the correct problem. Next slide, please. Now, why we must give importance to the formulation of the problem? Why not we just take up any problem which is suggested by the guide? See, the formulation of the right problem, it gives a direction and specific focus to the research effort. Otherwise, the researcher will not be on the track. his research work will become a slipshod. Sometimes the researcher in the midway may feel unsecured. He may have a feeling of insecurity. And therefore, proper topic selection helps the researcher to go in the right path. And not only that, it helps him to delimit the field of inquiry. What is delimiting the field of inquiry? Pertinent facts alone are singled out from the ocean of facts. We have got a ocean of facts. From these facts, we must cull out the relevant data for our research work. This is called delimiting the field of inquiry, for which the right problem selection helps. And formulation of the right problem prevents blind research and indiscriminate gathering of data. Sometimes what happens, the problem may not be clearly defined. The researcher will go on collecting the data which are relevant and which are not relevant. And finally, he will sit and he will be shocked to see that most of the data collected by him are irrelevant for analysis. Then what is the use here? Indiscriminate gathering of the data should not be done, and for which the right problem selection helps. And remember, all the major tasks can be planned in the research without any waste of effort. Whatever be the task, that can be planned well and executed well without waste of time only when the problem is well formulated. The next necessity of defining the problem. This is what already I have told you. Clearly stated, it's not started. Clearly stated is half solved. But what is very important is it must be defined unambiguously. I'm going to give you each and every point coupled with example. Then you will understand it. And third one is proper definition of the research problem. It helps the researcher to be on the track. Track means he will be on the right path. Next one. What data are to be collected? What characteristics of the data are relevant? What relations are to be explored? What techniques are to be used? All these are decided only by the formulation of the right problem. For example, as I told you in the beginning, data to be collected depends on the problem that is well defined. If you choose a problem related to financing of small scale industries by banks, then we need to collect the data which are relevant for the small scale industries. What characteristics of data are relevant? Whether we have to collect the data from the small scale industries, data relating to loans and advances given by the banks, or loans and advances given by other financial institutions, and what are the characteristics of the data which are relevant, and the relations to be explored. What relations are to be explored? Suppose the inflation is high, then banks go on dispersing huge amount of loans. Suppose there is a recessionary condition, banks do not disperse the loans. And finally, what techniques are to be used for analysis purposes? All these are possible with the help of the formulation of the right problem. Next one. Now, Oral Akoff has said that these are the components of the research problem. There must be an individual or a group which has some difficulty or a problem. Now, in academic research, we select the problem, but in actual situation, what will happen is, see, recently in the medical field, we had a problem. The viral infection started in China. In the laboratory in Wuhan, they started experimenting. So an individual or a group must have suffered from a problem or difficulty. And there must be some objective to be attained. What is the objective here? Viral infection has started affecting millions of people. So how the virus could be contained, objective. Through injection, through vaccination, or through other methods. And what are the alternative means for obtaining the objectives? Objective is to contain the virus. How this virus could be contained? Through vaccination or through other methods. For example, in our Siddha and other traditional medicines, we had other alternatives like Siddha medicines, then yoga, then the pranayama, etc. Alternative means for obtaining the objective. And the researcher will have some doubt in his mind regarding the selection of the alternatives. Because if the alternatives are certain, there is no need for research. The alternatives, several alternatives are there. So the researcher must have a doubt whether vaccination alternative will be good or the other alternatives like internal medicines. Our Defense Research Development Organization, DRDO, has invented a powder. This powder is to be mixed with water and taken by the patient. Immediately the oxygen level is increased. So whether that will be effective in containing the virus. So the researcher must have some doubt in his mind regarding the alternative. Because several alternatives are there. Which alternative will be suitable has to be decided by the research. That will be known only at the end of the research. And there must be some environment to which the difficulty pertains. Now, the environment is throughout the world, not in one country. Throughout the world, the virus has spread and therefore difficulty pertains to the whole world, not some environment. And finally, research problem requires the researcher to find out best solution for the given problem. Best solution. They have found out a vaccination. India has joined hands with Oxford and Oxygenica. We have found out the Covishield and Covaxin. Whereas the other countries have invented, Russia has found out the Sputnik. China has found out discovered one medicine. US has Moderna. US has invented a medicine. Now Johnson & Johnson has invented a medicine. So number of medicines are there. Number of vaccinations are there today. Which is the best solution? And next slide. Questions about the topic as to its feasibility. Now every researcher must ask himself whether the topic really is of interest to us or not. For which I am coming to that later. Disinteresting or uninteresting, dry topics will not help the researcher at all. So if you want to put your heart and soul in research work, then it must be really of interest to the researcher. And second one, the problem must be a significant one. That is why I told you, researcher must be sensitive to the problem that is faced in the current situation. And third one, will there be adequate supervision and guidance? Now, I have chosen a topic depending on my interest, but whether my guide has sufficient knowledge to guide me in this particular area. Suppose our guide says that, sorry, I am not competent in this line, then better we can choose a different guide. Foreigners are very transparent and open. When we send a mail to them, sir, I am guiding this candidate. I would like your name to be included in the panel of examiners. This is his area, this is his topic. Immediately the reply mail will come and say, sorry, I am not competent in this field, and therefore I cannot value this research thesis. Like that, what is our area of research? What is the area of specialization of the guide? The guide cannot be an expert in all the fields. If somebody comes and asks me, sir, please guide me in an area in which I am not specialized, then I should openly acknowledge, I'm sorry, I cannot guide you in this. Because in research, the guide is not going to learn the subject new. The guide is going to widen his knowledge, which he has already acquired. The researcher only is going to acquire new knowledge. And therefore, adequate supervision and guidance should be forthcoming. And next one, can the topic be completed in the required time? For example, for our PhD, 3 years or 4 years, time is specified. Maximum 5 years is for one registration. Whereas in other industries, industry-oriented research, the time is still limited, 1 year or 6 months, because it is there is a dire necessity on the part of the company or factory to find out solution to the problem that is faced by them, and whether sufficient equipments are available, library facilities are available. When the University Grants Commission sanctions a major research project, or when earlier Planning Commission, now Niti Aayog, when they sanction projects, they ask the question whether the institution has required facilities available to help the researcher to undertake research. So we must have necessary equipments and adequate library facilities, and it must be used by the researcher, for which only the researcher pays overhead charges to the institution. And finally, are subjects available to experimental treatments and testing? Now we need to experiment, we need to test. Are subjects available? Subjects here refer to the respondents in a limited way. That is called the subjects. See, we undertake a pilot study. We undertake pre-testing of questionnaires. Now, this pilot study is undertaken to find out whether the research project will be feasible or not. Pre-testing is done to test our interview schedule or questionnaire, and therefore whether the subjects are available for experimental treatment and testing. Next one. Next slide. Now, as I told you earlier, we may take the help from the research guide, but the research problem must spring from the researcher's mind only. The research guide can at the most only help the researcher choose the subject. Therefore, as a research guide, we should not impose any topic on the scholar. We must leave it to the scholar depending on his area of interest, his level of knowledge. What is his level of knowledge? That must be considered. Next one. These are the points to be observed while selecting the problem, because this is known to everybody. But however, I repeat here, overdone subject should not be chosen. In the next session, I will give you a list of areas where the research has already been done. Again and again, if you choose the topics in the same area, then we cannot make any contribution to the existing fund of knowledge. It is better new areas are chosen. Then controversial subjects should be avoided. See what happened, some 10 years back, I remember, in a nearby university, I don't want to name the university, in a nearby university in Tamil Nadu, a researcher chose a topic related to Kaveri water dispute. Not in commerce, in other field. And he found out something. And he published also a paper which was controversial in nature. Kaveri water dispute is a dispute rather among 3 states, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. And therefore, as a researcher, we cannot do anything here. The matter is at the Supreme Court level, Kaveri water dispute level. Therefore, we are not supposed to make any comment here. Then we received a letter from the government of Tamil Nadu stating that such controversial subjects should not be chosen for research purposes hereafter, because the research findings may be against the interests of the state. Similarly, too narrow, too vague problems should be avoided. Too general topics also should not be chosen. For example, you choose a topic related to whole of the country. It is not possible. Too narrow, say for example, particular block level, particular village level, we cannot do. Similarly, the problem also should be clearly defined. It should not be vague. And finally, the subject selected must be familiar and feasible. I still remember in 96, when I was called for a presentation by the UGC for major research project. First of all, some 29 people we were called from throughout the country. And the Joint Secretary addressed all of us. Before going for presentation, the Joint Secretary UGC addressed us. And he said, gentlemen, please listen. You may be sanctioned the research project, but by undertaking the research project, it is not that you learn the subject for the first time. You must have sufficient knowledge in the broader area of the subject matter. Now you are going to acquire deeper knowledge into the subject. This is the purpose of this research project. Not that you are studying, you are taking up the research work in a totally unfamiliar, in a totally new subject. Which means that, as I already pointed out, breadth and depth of knowledge is needed for research. What is breadth of knowledge? What is depth of knowledge? Breadth of knowledge means in the subject. Suppose I am going to choose a topic in financial management. Then it means I must be fully familiar with the financial management. That is breadth. Then in financial management, I am going to take up my research topic related to, say, financial leverage or cost of capital or capital budgeting. Then in that particular topic, then I must have thorough knowledge. That is depth. This is called the breadth and depth of the knowledge. So the subject selected must be familiar and feasible. Next one. This is what we have already seen, whether the researcher is well equipped to carry out the research. He must ask himself the following questions. Whether the study falls within the budget, because cost factor is important, time factor is important, cost factor is important, and whether necessary cooperation can be obtained from the respondents. Suppose you go for field work. I took my research related to one central public sector undertaking in 87. When I did my research, I went to the central public sector undertaking for collection of data. But first, I explained the purpose of research to them. In turn, they asked me a question. What is the use for us? You are doing research, you may get a degree. But what is the use for us? Then I told them that this is related to the employees. Management has already asked for a copy of my thesis. So I will submit the copy. I will submit my recommendations to the management. So management will consider the demands of the employees from the research report also. This is what I said. Then selection of the problem must be preceded by a preliminary study. A preliminary study. So if the aforesaid points are observed, the research will not be a boring drudgery. It will be a louse labor. What is a boring drudgery? What all I have mentioned, if the above points are considered, then it will become quite interesting for the researcher. It will not be boring one. So these points should be taken up for selection of the research problems. Next slide, please. These are the different types of research problems. First one is the empirical problem. Now everyone is well aware that empirical problem is one which is known to the researcher through his sensory organs. We have 5 sense organs, and through these sense organs we come across all these problems. Therefore, the empirical problems, social researchers know them through their sensory organs in the actual real life situation. Whereas analytical problems are not empirical. They are essentially language and conceptual problems only. Because we don't come across any such empirical problems in the analytical one. It is only not factual, and it is also not a scientific problem. And third one is the normative problem. What is normative problem? Primarily, they depend on value judgments. See, judgments are statements which are desirable, preferred, moral, and imperative. Normative judgment. Actually, this is very difficult to achieve also normative research. But however, these normative problems also are taken up related to moral, what is desirable, idealistic situation. In normative problems, we come across idealistic situation. Normally, our researchers will be related to either empirical or analytical. Next one. Now, this is the relationship of a good research problem. I mean, criteria of a good research problem. Relation between the variables expressed. Now, we must find out what is the relationship that exists. Normally, cause and effect relationship may be there, or there may be relationship, may not be a cause and effect relationship. So, we must find out. Sometimes we apply the correlation or regression or multiple correlation, multiple regression or factor analysis. This is all dependent on the relationship between the variables only. And the problem must be clear, unambiguous, and it must be capable of being verified empirically with the data available. And as I said earlier, we must get a proper guidance from the research guide or supervisor. Level of research, so is it undergraduate or postgraduate or a higher level? That also we must look into. Experience and creativity is also needed. But sometimes the researcher may not have that much experience, but he needs creativity to undertake the research. Novelty, new area should be chosen, and it must be interesting also, and finally it must be important. Next one. This is related to review of the related literature. Now, why I am talking about review of related literature at the time of selection of the topic itself? Now, normally, when somebody wants to select a problem, all of a sudden we cannot suggest this is the topic you choose. First, we must ask the scholar to go to the library to listen to the lectures of the eminent experts, then to read the journals and books in the library. So, and go to the library and see the earlier thesis. Then only the research scholar gets an idea before selection of the problem. So, review of the related literature, it enables the researcher to define the limits of the field. We can find out what is the research done in this line earlier. We need not repeat the same research, and we can avoid unfruitful and useless problem areas. Duplication also can be avoided. And what is the type of the literature to be reviewed at various stages of research can also be known. Next one. And this review of literature, it gives the researcher an understanding of the research methodology. See what happens, in a separate chapter in our thesis, review of literature, the earlier studies are given, international studies, national studies, etc. Normally the title of the work undertaken already, and then what were the objectives, what were the major findings, these are given. So what methodology has been adopted by the researcher, that we can understand. And another important reason is to know about the recommendations of the previous researcher, what he has recommended. Sometimes the topic for research may be chosen from the earlier research also. He would have recommended that these are the areas which are untouched. Therefore, the future researchers can follow this. And the outcome of the investigations can be known in areas where similar concepts and methodologies has been already used. What is the outcome of the earlier investigations? And we may use the methodology here for arriving at solutions to the problems that we take up. Next one. This is called the technique of skimming. Technique of skimming. See, we must skim the material. We must flip through the book from cover to cover. We must flip. Flip means have a quick movement. That is called a flip. So we must flip through the book from cover to cover. You look at the title page. Look on the back of the title page. Then you read the preface. Then skim the table of contents. When you flip through the book, then you can read the opening paragraph of some chapters. Now, why this technique of skimming is to be adopted? Because when you read a book, you may get ideas as to what are the areas which are unexplored. And if the book has an index at the back, you can check it for specific items. Now it continues. Yes, next. Next. See here, this table shows what are the steps in the research process, what are the kinds of literature to be reviewed, and what is the purpose of review. Now, first one is the identification and selection of the problem. For identification of the problem, what are the materials to be sourced? Encyclopedia, textbooks, reference books, etc. What is the purpose? To gain preliminary orientation and background knowledge. Second, latest publications in the discipline. I told you earlier, journals, magazines, etc. Then purpose is to gain up-to-date knowledge in the field. Because textbooks will not give us up-to-date knowledge. Only the journals, magazines, etc. will give us up-to-date knowledge. Then To know the thesis that are already done, research works already done, ICSS are survey of research in social sciences. Then, to identify the research gap, you can visit the libraries and read the thesis there, or we can also read the bibliography of doctoral dissertations published by AIU. So these are the various materials that are to be seen at the time of identification and selection of the problem. Okay, for formulation of the problem, we have identified, but for formulating previous studies in the field, journals, published and unpublished thesis. Purpose is to become familiar with appropriate methodology and research. When you go through the earlier thesis, you can be familiar with the methodology and research techniques. Next one. Next slide, please. Now, this is the first step we have seen. First two steps are related to identification of the problem and formulation of the problem. Operationalization of the concept. What is the purpose here? The material, as mentioned in number 2, for clarifying the concepts and knowing measurement techniques. The preparation of the research proposal, which is illustrated in the books and published and unpublished thesis. Now here, to develop alternative design for formulating hypothesis. Construction of tools and collection of data, same materials are to be used. Then for gaining thorough knowledge of the process of tools and measurement. That is the purpose. And finally, drafting theoretical chapters and theory parts of other chapters. Again, you can refer to journal, textbook, reference books, etc. The purpose is to take notes and compile bibliography. So, this table shows the different stages, the different sources of material, and the purposes, etc. Next one, planning. Planning process. Now, the planning process here involves selection of the problem for research. So, we must identify few problems for research and we must evaluate the alternatives here. Several problems may be chosen here, not only one problem. Whereas in the second stage, formulation of the selected problems, we can choose the problem and define it clearly, and we can transform it into research questions. That is the second one. Third step is formulation of the hypothesis. Here, what are the propositions to be tested? They may be evolved here in this level. And the fourth one, conceptualization. What are the concepts that are associated with the problem under study? And they are operationally defined and measurement devices are designed. And finally, research plan or design. Now, this research plan covers all aspects of the research work and serves as a blueprint. Research plan is the blueprint for our endeavor. So, this is the planning process for selection of the research topic. Now, next one is the sources of the problems. Now, here you can see reading. Now, this is the first one, the most important source from which one may be able to identify the research problem or develop research awareness. What are the things that must be read? We must study books and articles relating to the subject of our interest. See, sometimes it may strike to our mind when we read research reports, the areas of research, new areas of research may strike to our mind. So, reading is a must for any researcher at the time of selection of the topic itself. Second one is academic experience. See, classroom lecture, classroom discussion, seminar discussion, and out of class exchange of ideas with the fellow students, professors. Now they will offer stimulating experiences to the researcher. And next one is the daily experience. What is the daily experience here? See, our life is a dynamic. We learn many new things and we undergo many new experiences every day. As I said in the beginning, if we are alert, inquisitive, and sensitive to the real life situation, then we may hit upon the questions which are worth of investigations. Actually, Celtis, one authority, Celtis and others, in their book on research methods in social sciences, they say it is a mark of scientific genius to be sensitive to difficulties. So you become genius only when you are sensitive to the difficulties. Less gifted people only pass untroubled by doubts. So when do we say that we are gifted? We are gifted only when we are sensitive to the problems in the real life situation. Now the story of Newton justifies this daily experience. See, apples might have fallen. 1 minute. Hello. Yes, Yarna? So Newton's experience can be quoted here as example, because apples they had fallen in those days and now also fall on the earth. But Newton became sensitive to this experiment, and therefore he started his investigation and found out the laws of gravitation. So daily experience, Newton invented this law of gravitation only from his daily experience. Similarly, exposure to field situation. See, we take our students to many fields, factory visits, students go for internship training, students are taken for extension work in villages, etc. And they provide exposure to the practical problems. These practical problems may call for a study. And the next one is consultation. A person who wants to undertake a research may have discussions with the experts, researchers, administrators, business executives to identify meaningful problems for research. And the next one is brainstorming. We can have intensified discussion within a group of interested persons. Now here you may see the ideas may come from any person. Another I said, do not bother about the person who gives the idea. You consider the idea that comes from him. Therefore, in brainstorming, very valuable, very important ideas may be forthcoming. Next one is research. Researches which are already taken. Research on one problem may suggest problems for further research. And the next one is intuition. Sometimes new ideas may strike our mind like a flash. So remember that reflective mind is always a spring of knowledge. So these are the various sources of the problems, and through all these methods through many of these methods, the research scholar can identify the right problem. Next one. Vinayamurthy, can we give some 5 minutes break? Mr. Vinayamurthy?
Sir, please, sir. Please, sir. We can have a break, sir. No problem, sir.
Yes, because it is 11:30. I started
Okay,
by
sir.
10 o'clock. We can have 5 minutes break and continue. Huh?
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
ஆமா ஆஃபர் ஏதோ போட்டுதான் எல்லாத்துலேயுமே. இருந்தது அது இன்சார்ஜ் நல்லா தெரிஞ்சது செங்கல்பட்டு. செங்கல்பட்டு நீங்கள் அவங்க
Kindly mute, sir, please.
ஆமாம் ஆமாம்.
Can we restart, Mr. Vinayamurthy?
Sir, please, sir. Please, sir.
So please show the PPT. So we have so far seen the sources of the problems. Now the process of identification. First one is the selection of the discipline. Now here, discipline here refers to the subject. It may be economics or commerce or management or technology or psychology, anything. But what is the broad area of our research work? And it is expected that the researcher is thorough with the discipline. Suppose I choose human resources management, then I should have studied the subject and I must be thoroughly conversant with the various functions of human resources management, starting from human resources planning, ending with the industrial relations, human resources planning, recruitment, selection, training, compensation, then promotion, transfer, then discharge of the employees, then industrial unrest. Even I must be familiar with the labor laws like Factories Act, Industrial Disputes Act, little. So only when I am familiar with the discipline, then I can go to the next step, namely demarcating the broad area or particular aspect of the selected subject. Now, for example, the selected area is, we have selected the discipline human resources management, then we can choose the particular aspect of the subject, namely the training programs, effectiveness of training programs given to the employees. So this is the area is demarcated. The third one is identifying 2 or more specific topics in the selected broad area. See, this is the final step in the identification of the problem. Now, this process requires, this stage requires a thorough grasp of the subject and awareness of the work already completed. Now, here it is advised that totally an uncharted path on the one side, uncharted path one side, and a well-trodden path on the other side. Both are dangerous to a beginner. What is uncharted path? Uncharted path means totally a new area where there is no previous study at all. Then on the other side, well-trodden path. Well-trodden path means overdone area. For example, evaluation of performance, number of studies have been undertaken. Job satisfaction, number of studies have been undertaken. Unless something new is going to emerge, it is advisable that we do not stick on to the already explored areas. So, the researcher can select any one of the identified problems for his research work, and he has to evaluate the topic of research by choosing the most appropriate one. Which is the most appropriate? This is dependent again on availability of data and amenability for analysis. The first slide which I showed, formulation of the right topic helps in identification of the adequate data and analysis. Identification of the data then helps in collection of the relevant data. Then collection of the relevant data finally helps in solving the problem. So this is the process of identification. The next one is criteria of selection. There are 2 types of criteria. One is internal, the other one is external. Now, internal criteria, next one. Internal criteria here consists of researcher's interest. Here, the research work is actually a challenge to the researcher. As I said earlier, curiosity, inquisitiveness are very important. And we are expected to develop sustained perseverance. Perseverance is important. Patience is very much required. Hard work coupled with patience alone will yield the desired results in this part. If the researcher loses interest, even a small excuse may result in discontinuing his research work. Remember, I have come across many researchers saying that, sir, I want to change the topic because the data are not forthcoming, or I want to discontinue in the middle because I find it very difficult to analyze the data. I am not able to apply any analytical tool at all. At a later stage, they find out all these impediments, that is the shortcomings. But if the researcher has a sustained interest, then he can overcome all these problems very easily. Second one is the researcher's competence. This is very important because as a researcher, we must be competent to carry out the research study. You must have the ability to grasp and deal with the problem. One must possess adequate knowledge about the subject matter, research methodology, and tools. So familiarity with the subject, familiarity with the research methodology, familiarity with the application of tools is important here. That constitutes the researcher's competence. And third one is the researcher's own researcher's own resource, basically cost factor and the time factor. So whether the researcher gets any financial assistance from any agency or whether he uses his own funds, that also decides the selection of the research topic and the time factor within which period the research is to be completed. The next slide. External factors. Researchability of the problem. Now, what is researchable? The problem must be researchable. It means it must be amenable for finding answers to the questions through the scientific method. It must be capable of being analyzed. See, we use several methods: observation method, then direct interview method, personal interview method, or telephone interview method. Number of methods we use for data collection. Then we use methods for data analysis. But we must find out whether the problem is amenable for research. Then second one is importance and urgency. See, problems which require investigation are unlimited, but available resources are limited. Problems are unlimited, resources are limited. So, in selecting the problem, relative importance must be seen. Normally, when we have so many works, we rank them in order of priority. Similarly, here, the research problem must be ranked in the order of relative importance and urgency. The next one is novelty of the problem or originality of the problem. So we must not waste the time in studying the problem which has been already researched by umpteen number of researchers. there is no use at all. And our research also will not attract the attention of others, because they will simply say, no, this has been already done by many people. So we must choose. Here in this point, I would like to share my own experience. We in our always suggest topics which are not at all chosen by others. But the candidate will suffer to a certain extent, in the sense he will not have the previous literature. But no issue in that particular aspect, because we can claim that our research is the pioneering work. And the next one is the feasibility of the research. Now, what is the feasibility here? Whether the research techniques are suitable, that is the feasibility. Second one, will the authorities of the institutions extend the fullest cooperation? Whether the respondents will be willing to provide the required information, whether the study can be completed on time, all these constitutes the feasibility. Then facility is available. I told you, well-equipped library, then suitable and competent guide, data processing facility, all these facilities must be available. And the usefulness and social relevance. Any research that we undertake must make a significant contribution to the society. And therefore, we must choose a problem which is encountered by the people in the real life situation. I am going to give you the areas which are already done by the researchers, areas which are untouched by the researchers little later. Then the research personnel. See, research work is undertaken by the scholar. Suppose you are undertaking research in a research project, then the research funding agency provides you financial assistance to engage the services of research assistant. And there, your work becomes a little simplified, because the work can be shared with other people, research personnel. But they must be fully competent. They must also be fully trained to carry out the research work. Qualified and experienced research personnel. Of course, they are not easily available. You can see, even yesterday, I found in our newspaper, in Karaikudi, we have the Central Electrochemical Research Institute. They have called for applications for research personnel. They are paying 41,000 rupees per month plus HRA. So they want trained, they want experienced researchers. They say that in addition to the qualification, they must have adequate experience in the line of activity. Next slide. So, the feasibility I told you earlier, this I have already given you, whether suitable research techniques are possible to be used, such as measurement devices, techniques of analysis, whether they are available or not, suitable research techniques, whether the data are reliable and accurate, because the findings of the study depends on quality of the data. Then next slide. Whether the authorities will be able to extend the required cooperation, because what happened, I will share my experience with you in this case. I told you that I did my research related to a central public sector undertaking in 87-88 for my PhD work. I got the permission from them. Then I went there with my permission letter. They directed me to first go to the training wing, because he is the authority to give internal permission. Permission was given by the HR department, but later when I went to the actual company, they asked me to meet the concerned officer. Then I went there, he also gave me the permission. Then with that letter, I went to the units. Several units are there. When I went to one unit, the unit head refused to permit me. No, I cannot permit you to collect the data from my employees because it is a highly sensitive topic that you are researching. Therefore, I cannot permit you. Then what to do? He is the authority. If he does not give permission, then I explained, sir, I am not going to divulge any of this information to outsiders. It is purely for academic purpose. But he was not convinced. This all happened in the morning. Then after some time, during the lunch time, I found out there was a higher officer than this fellow. So I met the highest officer. Then I told, sir, I am from the university. I am working as a lecturer. I am doing my research topic. I have got the permission. I did not say that I was refused by the other fellow. So I just showed. Immediately said, okay, you already got permission, nothing wrong, and you are welcome to do research. So he gave me the permission. So like this, sometimes we may come across such difficulties, practical difficulties, but we cannot fight with them. It is their place. We have to oblige. We have to obey their rules and regulations. And they gave me the badge. Every day when you come here, you must wear the badge. And when you go to certain sections, you must wear the protective dresses. So they said all these things. We obliged, we obeyed their orders. And will the respondents be willing to be interviewed? They are already doing their work. So they must spare some time to provide information to our research work. So without affecting their work, without detrimental to their routine work, we have to collect the data. Can the study be completed within the time available? This is also quite important. Now it has been extended to 4 years without MPhil. With the MPhil, it is 3 years PhD work. Then we have the other timing factors also. And therefore, we must plan in the initial stage itself that the work, how it can be completed. And as far as possible, we must strictly follow the time schedule also. Next one. Now this is the formulation of the selected problem. First one is the originating question. Now, what is the originating question here? It may be of different kinds. It calls for a new and decisive fact. For example, the originating question may relate to adequacy of the fact, adequacy of the concepts which are related to the empirical validity. So first we must find out what the problem is. Originating question tells us what exactly is the problem, what one wants to study. Whereas the rationale of the question, second one, why aspect, is studied in the rationale of the question. The third one, in the specifying question, possible answers to the originating question are given here. Specifying question. These specifying questions are also known as investigative questions. So originating question is decomposed into several specific questions which are called specifying questions. Next one. Techniques of defining the problem. Actually, first we must define the problem in a general way. Then we must understand the nature of the problem. This I told you already. We must survey the available literature, develop the ideas through discussion, rephrase the research problem. This is very important. See, in the first one, statement of the problem in a general way, in some universities it is followed. Even now, at the time of registration for the PhD degree or for even D.Litt degree, they don't insist on the exact title of the research work. They want only general statement of the problem. After some time only, after rephrasing, they want the scholar to give the exact title of the research. Next one. The technical terms, words or phrases, they must be clearly stated. We call it as operational definitions. Basic assumptions, postulates, that is concepts, all must be stated clearly. And what is the value of the investigation? Why we are going to study this problem? What is its value to the society? What is going to be the contribution? You can see in the application form for financial assistance in UGC projects or ICSSR projects or any funding agency project, they will ask outcome of the project, possible outcome or expected outcome of the research work. So what that is called the value of the investigation. How it is going to provide value. Then suitability of the time period and source of data available. Budgeting of expenses alone is not given. Budgeting of time also is mentioned. Budgeting of time. So budgeting of time budget is needed. Then finance budget is also needed. And finally, scope of the investigation. What is the area of investigation? You cannot have a very broader scope. You have to narrow down the scope relevant to your objectives. Because in any research work, what we look at is what are the research objectives and whether we fulfill these objectives or not. Scope of the investigation will center around these objectives and fulfillment of the objectives only. At the time of evaluation of the PhD thesis also, what we look into is the objectives of the research and whether these objectives have been accomplished or not. Our chapterization also depends on the various objectives of the study only. Sometimes in the YOS, the participants or the YOS may ask, sir, why he has not studied this one? Why she has not studied that one? But scope of the investigation must be clearly defined. Then the researcher is safe. He need not go out of this purview of the study. Next. This is the formulation process. First, title must be developed. Then we must, here, I would like to give an example. Suppose we formulate a title. The title is, as I said in the beginning, financing the small scale industries by commercial banks. Now, what is the focus here? Financing the small scale industries by commercial banks. Now, focus is on commercial banks. Focus is not on small scale industry. So you can rephrase the title like this. How? Financial problems of small scale industries. If you rephrase the title like this, the emphasis will be upon the small scale industry, not by the banks. So this is the title development. Second one, building the conceptual model. Now here, the nature of the phenomenon, the properties, statements, interrelations, they should be identified. Conceptual model. I'm giving the next one, a conceptual model for, suppose I have chosen a topic, profitability of a commercial bank. I will come to that conceptual model little later because in the next slide. Third one, defining the objectives of the study. See, formulating the objectives is equally important as the formulation of the topic. I will give a small exercise also in this regard. How general objectives can be framed, how specific objectives can be framed in this part. So, defining the objectives will give us the right path to proceed. If your objectives are not clear, then you may go in a uncharted path. The next one, setting the investigative questions. Investigative questions. Several questions are to be set. That also I will give a small exercise now. Then operational definition of the concepts. I told you earlier, because there may be several technical terms and phrases, but for our research work, what terms we are going to choose, and delimiting the scope of the study. So these are the various steps involved in the formulation process. Now, I would like to take up the objectives of the study. Suppose the objectives of the study is given in a statement form. For example, I have framed one objective to identify. Suppose, for example, please go to the next slide. I will come from that. Next slide. Next slide, please. Mr. Vinayamurthy.
Sir, just a minute, sir. Sir, please.
Next slide. Now, suppose I choose a topic like this. I develop a conceptual model. Profitability of a commercial bank. Now you can see, interest paid expenses A, income is B, the spread is B minus A. Okay. Then manpower expenses, other expenses, here non-interest income, then burden. F, non-interest expenses minus G, non-interest income is equal to burden. Then total expenses, total income, net profit. Now this I have given a conceptual model. Now profitability of the commercial bank. Now from this conceptual model, how can we derive the objectives? This conceptual model must be framed first at the time of selection of the topic itself. From the conceptual model only, we can frame the objectives, because suppose in the conceptual model we come across that the profit fluctuates or profit declines in a bank. If the profit is not stable or if it changes, then how our objectives can be? Objective can be to identify the major factors affecting the bank's profitability. To identify the major factors affecting the bank's profitability. Then second, to determine the major causes of the declining trend in the profitability. First one, to identify the factors affecting. Second one, to determine the major causes for the decline in the profitability. And third one, to develop a strategy in improving the bank's profitability. So these are the objectives which are in a statement form. Suppose these objectives are given in a question form, research question form. It is easy to convert them into research question form. What are the factors which affect the bank's profitability? Then what are the major causes for the declining trend in the profitability? Then what strategy can be adopted for improving the bank's profitability? So this can be in the research question form. You understand? Suppose we choose a topic and we develop a conceptual model relating to profitability of the commercial bank, then the objectives can be like this. Then, with regard to investigative questions, I told you the originating question is decomposed into several specifying questions, which are called investigative questions. Suppose, for example, take the objective. What factors affect the bank's profitability? Then we take up interest on deposits, then interest on loans and advances. Like that, then what are the facts? What are the factors that affect the interest paid on deposits, on borrowings? What are the factors that affect the interest received on loans and advances? Then third one, what are the factors which affect the manpower expenses? So the profitability of the commercial bank, objectives we have framed to identify the major factors affecting the bank's profitability. Second, to determine the causes for declining profitability. Third, to ascertain the strategy, what strategy can be followed. These are the three objectives. Now, these objectives can be decomposed into several specifying questions or investigative questions, like what are the factors which major factors which affect the interest paid on deposits and borrowings? What are the factors which affect the interest received on loans and advances? Then third one, what are the factors which affect the manpower expenses? Now, each question can be again split into several sub questions. That way, our research topic becomes fully researched. Then we have the other steps in the process. Then next one, next slide, please. See, I have prepared a list of areas in our commerce and management which have been researched and which have been not researched. One minute, please. I will give you research areas in finance. Now you can interact with me. Please take a piece of paper and you can note down what are the areas which have been mostly researched in finance and what are the unexplored areas. In finance, what I have seen is, see, profitability analysis is mostly researched. Financial statement analysis, ratio analysis, this is mostly done. Working capital management, umpteen number of studies are there. There are studies on, many studies on dividend policies, cost of capital. But I have not seen much studies on capital budgeting, financial leverages. These studies, these topics are not that much researched in finance. Similarly, in taxation, see, taxation is an area which is not much researched in our commerce and management. But now this area offers greater scope for research, greater scope. For example, in taxation, what is done already is behavioral aspects of the assessees only is done. I have seen in few institutions, few universities, they have done what is the behavior of the assessees of income tax, salaried class, etc. And studies have been undertaken on earlier the service taxes, etc. Now customs duty. But today, the GST offers a great scope for undertaking research. Of course, the area is new. First of all, the researcher must be thorough with the GST. Then, because GST is changing every month, the rates of tax are changing every month. But there is great scope for undertaking research. And another area in taxation, recently, some 2 days back or 3 days back, there was an article in Business Line relating to retrospective taxation. This retrospective taxation was introduced by the Government of India during the last regime. But the present regime of the central government has totally scrapped retrospective taxation. Because what happened, Vodafone and Cain India, they have moved the international, Cain India has moved the international court, and they have got a judgment to attach the Indian company's assets in several foreign countries. So the Government of India decided, okay, please don't proceed with the court order. We will bring out a legislation to scrap the retrospective taxation. So retrospective taxation is an area which can be researched. So this is taxation. Then next one is, you can see banking. I have given the research works in banking. These are the areas already researched: customer service, profitability and performance evaluation, credit management, deposit mobilization, NPA and asset quality, because number of studies have been undertaken in NPA and asset quality management. Then job satisfaction of the bank employees, stress management. Actually, this comes both in HRM as well as banking area also. Number of studies have been undertaken in job satisfaction of the bank employees and the stress management. Next slide. Human resources issues in banks. Comparative studies of public sector banks and private sector banks on various dimensions. This is a type of study also has been undertaken in many research works. Few public sector banks will be taken up and few private sector banks will be taken up. And recently I saw one study, financial inclusion, a comparative study of public sector and private sector banks in a particular district. Then, yes, next one is financial inclusion is there, strategies and issues, priority sector lending by banks. Then retail lending by the banks, corporate governance in banking. Corporate governance is widely researched. The institution is only changed. Corporate governance in banking. Next. E-banking. In e-banking, you can see number of topics are available. Have been researched. Impact of technology on banks' performance, awareness and usage of e-banking services, perception of users about various services, determinants of user behavior on various channels, security and private issues, efficacy of the e-banking channels. Because today, entire banking, even our university department has changed the nomenclature from bank management to banking management, because there is no specific place called bank today. Everything has become technology oriented. Therefore, number of studies are undertaken every day with regard to the security of the deposits, privacy issues, etc. Next. Various studies on RRBs, regional rural banks and cooperative banks, problems and prospects in rural banking, social funding for green initiatives, performance evaluation of bank. Now, all the participants may have seen several areas, because in finance, banking is the mostly researched area. And I have just summarized all possible topics that have been already done. But there are areas in banking also which are untouched. Next slide. This is the research gap in banking. Risk management in banks. How many studies have you seen? Now, the studies are very, very limited. Risk management. Similarly, financial stability and prudential regulation, a cross-country analysis. See, every now and then the regulators like RBI, then other regulators are coming out with they are coming out with new regulations. Therefore, prudential regulations and financial stability, a cross-country analysis may be undertaken. Then causes and consequences of financial crisis. See, you can see number of reasons are there for financial crisis. Many countries are facing financial crisis, but of course, in India, the fundamentals are strong, and therefore we don't have much problems. But however, the causes and consequences of banking crisis. Recently, several banks have been hit. Punjab National Bank was hit by a scam. Then Yes Bank has been closed and taken over by State Bank of India, part of it. Then in Tamil Nadu, Lakshmi Vilas Bank has been taken over by one Singapore-based bank. So this crisis, banking crisis, can be taken up for study. The next one, consumers protection. Consumers protection and regulatory. Sir, please go to the previous one. Consumers protection and regulatory framework in Indian banks. Because the bank is a public utility service, therefore there is banking ombudsman. I do not know how many researchers have taken up a banking ombudsman for the research work. The next one. Next slide, please. Monetary policy transmission mechanism in India. Because monetary policy is framed by Reserve Bank of India and it is transmitted to the banking sector. And what is the mechanism that is adopted? Monetary policy challenges in India. Cross-selling by banks, perception, problem and strategies. Which means, see, banks are instructed by the Reserve Bank of India to raise or lower the rate of interest on loans given by the commercial banks to the trade, industry, commerce, etc. And the repo rates are charged by the Reserve Bank of India. Here, the cross-selling by the banks. Banks pay interest on deposits and the banks receive interest on loans and advances. Now here, what is the perception? What is the problem? And what strategy can be adopted? Today, the rate of interest on deposits has drastically been cut to 5 point something in nationalized banks. Whereas loans can be obtained right from some 7.5 or 8% onwards. So these aspects can be studied. Then environmental, social and governance, investing and banking. Green finance by banks. This is an area which is not much researched. Green finance, that is loans by banks for green initiatives. Next one. Developments in digital banking. This area is also not much researched. digital banking development. And next one is a very important area. It has recently come into existence. Some 3 years have passed. Recently means IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code related issues. So we can take up this particular area for research. Then post-merger integration issues of public sector banks. Just now I told you, LVB, Yes Bank, etc. They have been taken over out of crisis, but Government of India ordered merger of certain banks here. For example, Allahabad Bank has merged with Indian Bank. Then I've forgotten. Punjab National Bank has taken over Syndicate Bank, I suppose. So many existing banks, small banks were taken over by larger banks. So what is the post-merger integration issue? Then efficacy of deposit insurance scheme in India. Then financial inclusion in Jan-Dhan Aadhaar Mobile, because crores of accounts were opened in one day in the Jan-Dhan scheme. Then gender diversity in banks, role of banking codes and Standard Board of India. So the functioning of this SBI. So we can study about all these areas which are not at all researched. We again and again choose the same topics which have been already done. Next. Role of small finance banks and payment banks in financial inclusion. Now, this is a recent concept, payment bank, small finance bank, etc. Then performance evaluation of small finance banks and payment banks. National Payment Corporation of India and digital banking, cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, evaluation of anti-money laundering. It is not, it is wrongly spelled. Anti-money laundering framework. Then cyber security issues, ethics in banking, impact of pandemic on Indian banking sector. So these are all the areas which can be taken up for research work. Next. Now, next one is insurance. See, before going to the insurance, I will tell you certain other areas. For example, in entrepreneurship, it is not in the slide. You can see business idea generation, flotation of new enterprises, preparation of, conducting market surveys, then project appraisal studies. All these things we can take up for both research work and project work. Then in production, we can take up inventory management system. This area is not much researched. Inventory management system. Then automation, stores management, then cost management, work measurement, etc. Then in accounting, accounting standards, IFRS, IAS, Indian accounting standards, they can be researched. And then in HRM, you can see number of areas have been already researched. For example, human resources planning, recruitment and selection policies, then training methods and effectiveness, compensation methods and incentives, workers' participation management, trade union movement, then industrial relations like strike, lockout, layoff, etc. Social security measures like PF, ESI, etc. Then job satisfaction and morale of the employees, motivation theories and their application. These are all researched areas. But now there is one area which is not at all researched, or even many people are not familiar. Recently, the Government of India has brought out many amendments in the labor law. Articles appear in the newspapers frequently on labor code, labor law reforms, etc. So, in HRM and industrial relations, we can take up this one for research work. The next one is marketing. Marketing is an area where much research has been done in commerce and management in 4 P's: product, pricing, promotion, physical distribution, then market segmentation, consumer behavior, marketing functions. In all these areas, it has been done: CRM, customer relationship management, and sales promotion system, etc. Then in international business, export documentation, logistics management, foreign exchange usage, awareness studies relating to various agreements, etc. Then in corporate law, many studies have been undertaken on company law, Competition Act, then intellectual property rights like Patents Act, Trademarks Act, Copyrights Act. But however, in commerce, I have not come across many studies in this law, because our people are rather hesitant to take up any study relating to complaints with the law, because probably they might think that data may not be forthcoming. But studies have been undertaken on Patents Act, Trademarks Act, Copyrights Act, then environmental pollution, air pollution, water pollution, then Foreign Exchange Management Act, Consumer Protection Act. Many studies have been undertaken on Consumer Protection Act. But the recent act passed by the central government, namely RERA, R-E-R-A, even I suggested this topic to one of the students. RERA, she is working in a women's college here. She has taken up this Real Estate Regulation Act, then FCNR, Foreign Contribution Regulation, then money laundering. These are the areas which can be taken up for research work. Then general management, many studies have been undertaken. Say sustainable development, Indian ethos in management, then management, application of management principles, which are available in our literature, then corporate governance, corporate social responsibility, Millennium Development Goals. So these areas have been researched. Now coming to insurance, you can see studies have been undertaken on these topics: performance evaluation of insurance companies, problems of the policyholders, customer satisfaction, role of agents, efficacy of the distribution channels, awareness and usage of insurance products and services, then marketing strategies of insurance companies, then comparative studies of public and private sector insurance companies, HR issues in insurance. So in insurance also, studies have been undertaken on these topics. Next. Now, what is the research gap? You would not have come across much research on vehicle insurance, impact on road safety, corporate governance in insurance company, then asset quality of insurance companies, liquidity and solvency of Indian insurance companies, health insurance, progress, problems and prospects, the impact of COVID-19 on Indian insurance sector, because pharmaceutical industry and insurance industry have become most sought after the pandemic. And therefore, we can choose topics related to COVID-19, etc. Crop insurance, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana evaluation study. So, these are the topics which can be taken up for research in insurance, just like banking and in other areas. So, my suggestion is that instead of doing research on the same topics already overdone area, it is better to tread in the new path, and that will actually help us. With that, my slides are over. Right, next one is there. Pricing of insurance products. Client settlement, this is very, very cumbersome rather. Client settlement in the post-COVID period, trends and issues. Then insurance penetration, how policies have been sold to the grassroots level. Then Ayushman Bharat evaluation, performance of COVID coverage policies, and gender diversity in insurance sector. So these are all the topics which can be researched in insurance. Now we can, I hope that I have given a range of topics which have been already researched in several areas in commerce and management. Now I leave the platform for interaction. Mr. Vinay Murthy?
Sir.
Yes, you can ask the participants to interact with me.
Okay, sir. Dear participants, please, this is a time for interaction, please. Only for you we have sent a Google Meet link. Please use this chance to interact with Professor. Thank you.
Yes, Nidya Karpakam, you can ask me a question.
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, actually, I am a beginner researcher. I have one small doubt, sir. Actually, I frame a limitation of the study after during my research time. If limitation is increased or any new limitation arised in my area, shall I include it in my study at the end of the time, sir? It is possible.
See, limitations are the constraints which you face during the course of your study, which you expect. And these limitations are the practical difficulties which you came across. For example, you go to the field for collecting the data. The respondents are not cooperating with you.
Okay.
But what happens is, many a time, our research scholars and the researchers, even experienced researchers, what they are putting is, suppose we have chosen Sivaganga district or Tamil Nadu, immediately they say, limitation first one, I have chosen only Tamil Nadu, I have not chosen other states. This is one limitation, they say. No, this is wrong. What you have already confined, you have already defined, demarcated the area of study.
Okay, sir.
That cannot be a limitation. Limitation is actually the constraints that you faced while carrying out your study.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Suppose there are problems with regard to adequacy of data. There are problems with regard to reliability of the data. There are problems with regard to validity of the data. They can be stated as limitations. But
okay, sir.
I have confined my study only to bank employees. I have confined my study only to a particular institution employees, means that cannot be called as a limitation.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay, sir. I understood. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, you explained about the curiosity and inquisitiveness.
Yes.
These are the only two characteristics can influence the researcher attitude.
Yes. Now see, I told you in the beginning that the curiosity, inquisitiveness, and the imagination See, this curiosity and inquisitiveness, they are the features of the human beings. We are curious to know about ourselves, to know about our institutions, about our environment, about our planet, about even other planets, or even the universe. This curiosity is inherent in everybody. And innumerable questions arise in our mind. This is all out of curiosity only. And therefore, one who has curiosity, one who has inquisitiveness. Inquisitiveness is, let us not simply detach ourselves from the problem. Oh, this is his issue. Why should we unnecessarily interfere? Inquisitiveness is knowing the others' problems. So, curiosity and inquisitiveness are inherent in human beings. The thing is that we are not using them. I told in the very beginning that we come across innumerable questions in our life and we try to seek answers for the same. Similarly, we encounter many problems and we try to find solutions to these problems. Our life revolves around these two things: seeking answers to the questions and finding solutions to the problems. And when you make a systematic attempt, it becomes research. Similarly, researcher also should have the curiosity, a critical mind, imaginative mind, alert mind, etc.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So in that way, a common person or any layman also, knowingly or unknowingly, he or she can do the research.
Certainly. But he might not have made a systematic attempt. That is the problem. He might be curious and he might be collecting the data on that, and he might be analyzing. Everything he will do in a modest way, not in an advanced manner. A researcher, having chosen the right problem, he proceeds in the right direction to collect the data which are relevant for accomplishing the objectives, which are relevant for analysis. That is the difference between a layman and a systematic researcher.
Sir, in rural area, the farmers are doing in the same manner what to sow and when to sow, what is the crop yielding. All these things they are done on the basis of their experience.
Yes.
But whereas in the case of educated people, what we are doing, how far it is helpful to the society? Why we are not doing that social oriented research for the benefit of upliftment of the society? What is the reason and what is the drawback in
I told
society?
you at the beginning of my lecture that novelty, it must be interesting, etc. But one more point is that it must be socially useful research also. See, you can choose any topic of your research for getting a degree or for compliance with regulation. But whether it is really useful to the society, how it could be? Suppose you choose a topic related to one particular industry and you carry out the research, submit your research dissertation, research thesis to the industry, and you request the industry to act upon it, to take action upon it. I still remember Professor Matthew of Annamalai University, he said in one of the seminars some 30 years back, see, every academic researcher in commerce should, as soon as he completes the research work or during the course of the research work, he must get the papers published in reputed journals, because once you publish it in reputed journals, your research findings, it gets disseminated to as many people as possible. dissemination of research findings also is a benefit of research. This also helps many people. Either this research paper may help them directly benefit them, or the researchers may choose further topics on research from our paper. So he used to say, whatever be your research work, try to disseminate the findings. And as far as possible, you choose a topic related to the applied research. That means which are really useful to the society. That is why I told you in the beginning, one must be sensitive to the practical problems faced in the society. Even one authority said, if you are not sensitive to the problem, then you are not gifted. Only less gifted people pass the untroubled in an untroubled manner. Gifted people never just go after noticing the problems. So one must be sensitive to the problems that are occurring in the day-to-day life.
Thank you,
Good
sir.
afternoon. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, actually, my question is related literature review. Actually, my research area is macroeconomic variables and stock market. And then there is a lot of research papers already published regarding individually exchange rate, gold price, crude oil price, and versus stock market, either Nifty and BSE. So actually, sir, I would like to mention in my research how many literature review actually best suitable and best for best literature review. How many literature review will be considered, sir?
No, there is no specific number of studies that you must show in your previous review of previous studies. But what is needed is you can divide the earlier studies into two categories. One is the earlier research studies that have been undertaken related to your topic of research. Then number two, not the research studies, but the articles and the papers that have been published.
Yes, sir.
So give importance to the research studies, because research studies, as I mentioned in my lecture, that only gives you the methodology that may be adopted, and that also helps you not to duplicate the research work.
Yes, sir.
So those studies chronologically may be given in your thesis. That is number one. Number two, you may also get ideas from not the research studies, but simply the articles written by the learned people. So from the articles, they might not have conducted any research, but their own opinions. As I said, while selecting the topic, you may have, you can listen to the expert lectures, you can consult with the experts, you can read the books, you can flip through the books. Number of sources are there, so you can mention them, but see that it is related to your study. Unrelated works need not be shown just to fill up the pages of review of literature. It is not necessary to show all the studies. It is not necessary. It is not necessary to show all these things.
Yes, sir. Actually, sometimes, sir, Wikipedia, related topic, Wikipedia is very much useful. Then, sir, Wikipedia, may I consider as a literature review regarding respective Wikipedia page as for literature review?
No, actually, Wikipedia matters and others which are authoritatively given, because when you mention something, you must acknowledge the source also, whatever you write in your research work.
Yes, sir.
Even, for example, several years back, if I remember correctly, some 10 or 15 years back, CNN dismissed one of its employees for simply taking one paragraph from the New Yorker to Times magazine.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Times
sir.
magazine, what he did was he simply borrowed one para and wrote it in the Times magazine from the New Yorker. What happened was it was treated as a plagiarism. Therefore, what I say is, whether it is Wikipedia or any other thing, find out the genuineness and authority.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Second one, acknowledge the source. Anything which is given in your thesis must be duly acknowledged, mentioning the source from where it has been borrowed.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm Srinivas, Central University of Tamil Nadu, sir. Sir, are you audible, sir?
Yes, yes, audible. Please ask.
Sir, I'm Srinivas from Central University of Tamil Nadu, sir. I have done my research work in e-resource and medical college, sir. Sir, how to summarize research gaps, sir? How to summarize research gaps?
No, see, when you go through the earlier studies, actually research gap can be bridged by looking at by going through the previous studies in our area. And sometimes what happens is the research gap is misunderstood by many research scholars. What they say, sir, this has been studied in Tanjavur district, whereas this has not been studied in Madurai district. So there is a research gap. So the area may be different, but research gap implies that the researcher might have taken up certain objectives, and these objectives might have been fulfilled, but he would have forgotten to frame some objectives related to that research itself, or the objectives would not have been fully accomplished. Sometimes the researcher himself will acknowledge in the scope for future research, due to paucity of time, I have not taken up these objectives, or I have not taken up these areas for my research.
Yes, sir.
Due to constraint of financial resources or due to paucity of time, I have not focused upon these areas. And therefore, I have confined myself only to a particular area. So that way, you can find out what exactly is the gap in research, number one. Number two, when you go through the earlier studies, please compare the objectives and the findings. In the previous literature, review of previous studies, every researcher is expected to give the objectives and the findings of the study. And there you can find out whether it has been fully covered or not.
Yes.
So that is the very purpose of review of previous literature. There are many objectives, there are many benefits, but one important benefit of review of literature is to find out the research gap and how our study tries to fill up the gap.
Okay.
That must be looked into.
Thank you very much, sir, for clarifying my doubts.
Thank you.
Sir, excuse me, sir.
Yes, yes, sir.
Sir, in banking and finance or maybe commerce or management, can we go for any qualitative research other than quantitative?
Yes, why not? Qualitative research is very popular in foreign countries, particularly behavioral finance. It's very, very popular. So we can undertake behavioral finance here. Even I have forgotten his name. Recent Nobel Prize winner got the behavioral economics only. He got the Nobel Prize, and therefore, in behavioral aspects we can undertake. Even I mentioned in one of the untouched areas, the behavioral aspects we can very well undertake. But only problem that you may face is you have to elicit the cooperation of the respondents. That is the purpose. That is the problem that you may come across. Because you are going to study the behavior. Studying the behavior is mostly possible through observation only. But as far as the financial aspects are concerned, unless you get the replies from them, it is very difficult to find out the behavior of the people. Suppose it is a simply behavioral study, you can observe and write. But it is a behavior with regard to the financial aspects. I told that in taxation, I came across a study related to behavior aspects of the assessees with regard to payment of tax. There, you have to obtain the information from the respondents. Related to tax, it is very difficult to get. So better in research related to taxes, you can meet the chartered accountants instead of the assessees. Chartered accountants are the persons who can give information about the assessees rather than the assessees themselves. Either the assessees may not be aware or they may not be willing to provide you the required information.
So one question about problem finding. Whether literature review should be kept on priority or problem. Whether we should find problem first or literature review we should do.
No, I told you several sources of the problems, sir. See, you have to go through all these sources. You can first you have to specify your broader area of research. I told you the selection of the discipline, broader area. After becoming familiar with the broader area, then you can go to the next step. That is, you can demarcate the area into a particular aspect. For this purpose, you need to go through the relevant literature. So, identification of 2 or more topics in the selected broad area, which is the final step in the identification process, this also depends on the reading, academic experience, consultation, then exposure to field situation, then brainstorming, etc. So these are the several sources of the problems which you can tap. So all of a sudden we cannot choose a topic. Broader discipline first, second, then the demarcating the area into a particular aspect. Then third one, choosing 2 or 3 topics, studying their feasibility, and finally coming to one selected topic depending on the availability of data and amenability for analysis. For all these purposes, we need to go through these, we need to tap these sources like reading, academic experience, daily experience, consultation, etc., etc. So, review of literature is a prerequisite at the time of selection of the topic. Review of literature is different from review of the previous, not different. Review of literature means you can read all the relevant literature, including the thesis related to the area that we are planning to choose.
And one more added question, sir.
Yes, sir.
What kind of analysis related to literature review in management is required? Whether meta-analysis or bibliography or both, or systematic review will do itself?
See, in review of literature, when you just go through the earlier studies, you will get an idea as to, as I mentioned in the table, you will get an idea as to what methodology they have followed. Nothing wrong in following the same methodology. Methodology in the sense, the selection of the sample, then selection of the data collection tool, then selection of the data analysis tools, etc. There is nothing wrong. You can choose the same methodology, and even, of course, the results may be the same or results may not be the same. That is a different issue. But verbatim, we are not supposed to reproduce. You can borrow the ideas. So when you go through the earlier studies, you get a thorough idea related to methodology, related to the findings, related to the objectives. And not only it helps us to follow the methodology, it also helps us not to repeat, not to replicate what they have already done. So duplication can be avoided. So that way, this review of previous studies becomes helpful.
Sir, one more question.
Yes, sir.
Please pardon me. Actually, you are saying about the demarcation and limitation and delimitation.
Yes, sir.
Whereas in the case of case studies, is there any scope for this delimitation or maybe demarcation and limitations to write?
Yes, certainly. Even see, case study is a method of research only, and the method of research for collecting the, method of research, case study being the method of research, simplifies all these processes. But you cannot do away with this process. Even for employing the case study method of research, you need to first choose the broad area, broad discipline. Second, you have to specify the area. Third, you have to select. See, case study does not mean that you can do away with all these steps. Case study, we used to say colloquially, studying something about everything is a descriptive study. Studying everything about something is a case study. So what you are going to do is, you are going to study everything about something. That is case study method. Therefore, in case study method, we will collect all relevant data, analyze them, then arrive at the solutions for the problem. So you make an in-depth study in the case study method.
Sir, that's why I'm asking, when we are going for in-depth study, very beginning of the study, can we delimit ourselves or can we write?
But however, while employing the case study method, then you must go through the earlier stages. Which area you are going to choose, which discipline, then which area in it, then for what purpose you are employing this case study method. See, you have to go through the earlier stages, then only you can engage the case study method. All of a sudden, how can you employ the case study method?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, sir. Actually, I have a question, sir.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi.
Okay.
Hello. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. Please ask.
Yes, sir. I have a question, sir. Actually, I am pursuing my research on features. My topic is study of feature effectiveness in relation to job satisfaction, occupational stress, and mental health of secondary school teachers.
Sir, your voice is not thoroughly audible. Please.
Yes, sir.
Or else you can type and send the message to me. It is not fully audible, sir.
Dear Asimji, please send your clarification through mail or try to type it. The chat box, please. The voice is not audible. Dr. Jean, sir?
Sir, yes, sir, I'm ready.
Sir, okay, sir. With this, you can conclude, sir. Please, sir.
It's immense pleasure and privilege to propose vote of thanks to this session. At the outset, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our HOD sir, given me a nice opportunity to propose vote of thanks to this session. I take this opportunity. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the great resource person of this session, our beloved Professor Dr. Manik Vasagam sir, for his very excellent and thought-provoking interactive session. Sir, I hope that, sir, everyone have enjoyed your session, and all the people who have acquired lot of information from your presentation, sir. Once again, I extend my sincere thanks to you, sir. Among your busiest schedule, you accepted our request and application. You given a very nice session to all the FDP program, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And I extend my sincere thanks to all the participants for your valuable presence and participation and interact with the resource person. Thank you one and all. On behalf of the Department of Commerce and my own behalf, extend my sincere thanks to all the participants. Thank you one and all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, participants. We'll meet at 2 p.m. Thank you. Thank you all.
Sir, shall we use same link?
Yes,
Same
yes, sir.
link,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes,
Same
sir.
link.
Same. No change. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.